Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. Hello, Zoom friends. We're glad you're with us today. My name is David Bakovin. I use the pronouns he and him. I am a middle-aged white guy who is completely bald, and I am this morning's worship associate. Our settled minister, Rev. Jen Youngsun Ryu, has the morning off today. All the information you might need to know about our Sunday gatherings can be found in our handy guide to Sunday worship. If you need one of those, maybe you could indicate as such, and a greeter could maybe get one of those for you. If you are joining us on the Zoom this morning, and you're a first-time visitor, maybe you could fill out the visitor's form, which should be being placed in the Zoom chat at this moment. After the service, please stay for the board's quarterly report and update on the Eugene Warming Center. And just remember, whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, you are welcome and belong here. And now, let us enter a time of worship by lighting the flaming chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Laura Keys will be lighting the chalice this morning. Come on down, as they say on The Price is Right. Good. Okay. The flame of our chalice this morning represents pneuma, the Greek word for breath. For the Stoics, this pneuma is a primordial fire burning at the core of all existence. Fire imagined as a life-giving breath. Although fire can also be obviously destructive, for the Stoics, this flame is a creative force with a life-giving character, an animating force in the world. For Stoics, this primordial fire represents the active and transformative nature of the universe. Our flame, too, symbolizes the dynamic and creative nature of divine order and harmony of the universe. May this fire be a source of life and vitality, driving the processes of growth, change, and development in our world. And now let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. Good morning again. Our service this morning came about as a suggestion from a visitor from earlier this spring who thought it might be interesting to learn about potential connections between our UU faith tradition and Stoicism, as Ryan was just telling us about. During the past year, we've been engaged in a kind of informal series of explorations of other connections from Zoroastrianism. From last summer, Rebecca's talk was really great, if you were here for that. And then also we did a pagan celebration of Beltane this spring. And then we've also had services that focus on Hinduism and Buddhism. So this morning, it's the turn of Stoicism, which is an ancient Greek and Roman philosophy that's had something of a popular resurgence in the past few years, such as the book The Daily Stoic, 366 Meditations on Wisdom, Perseverance, and the Art of Living, which contains quotations from ancient Stoics, such as the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, or the former slave Epictetus, along with modern reflections by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. Although the word Stoic, sort of a lowercase s Stoic, the way that Ryan was talking about it, it's burdened with these sort of negative associations of toxic masculinity and patriarchal elements within U.S. society. The phrase used within the military, "embrace the suck," comes to mind. Which you wouldn't necessarily associate that, I don't think, with Unitarian Universalism. Usually, it's kind of a different vibe. But the original philosophy, Stoicism, we could say Stoicism with an uppercase S, actually does have really good connections and commonalities with Buddhism and modern cognitive behavioral therapy. It's difficult to generalize about an original philosophy, given its long time period of strong influence, which was from about 300 BCE to 250 CE. So that's like about a 500 or 600 year span. It's kind of like within that time period, there's quite a bit of variety and, people with different views. And when it migrated from Greece to Rome, it sort of changed a little bit. Also, we don't have any of the writings from the original Greeks. We only have like the later Roman people as a guide, so it's hard to know exactly what it was about. But its ethical stance focuses on developing self-control to overcome destructive emotions by using clear and unbiased thinking to reveal the true nature of any given situation. The sermon this morning, which was written by Rainey Knight, Rainey's here, but it's going to be read by her partner Zephyr, will explore some of these connections further, as well as connections between Stoicism and the UU7 principles. They will be using the old 7 principles for this reflection. It may be worth mentioning that although the UUA did adopt 7 new values at this year's General Assembly, that's the JETPIG plus love, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Those are the new values. But the old values are still there at the same time. It's not like we're getting rid of them suddenly. And in fact, those the 7 principles, the older principles, plus the 8th principle that we adopted a couple of years ago, they're still a part of our official bylaws, the UUCE bylaws, till we change those, or if we change those. So, let's see.
Hello, I'm Zephyr Burton. I'm a he, him. I'm a relatively tall, middle-aged white guy with lots of hair. A reading on the topic of Meditations of Marcus Aurelius from dailystoic.com. I'm constantly amazed by how easily we love ourselves above all others. Yet we put more stock in the opinions of others than in our own estimation of self. How much credence we give to the opinions of our peers and how little our very own. These words are from the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. The 12 journals are the private thoughts of the world's most powerful man, giving advice to himself on how to make good on the responsibilities and obligations of his position. He was the Roman emperor from 161 to 180 AD. Trained in Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius stopped almost every night to practice a series of spiritual exercises, reminders designed to make him humble, patient, empathetic, generous, and strong in the face of whatever he was dealing with. Despite his privileges as emperor, Marcus Aurelius had a difficult life. The Roman historian Cassius Dio mused that Marcus did not meet with the good fortune he deserved, for he was not strong in body and was involved in a multitude of troubles throughout practically his entire reign. But throughout these struggles, he never gave up. When Marcus speaks of the certainty of death and how relatively soon it will come, he is not idly philosophizing. He is recommending that this fact advise our decision-making and how we view the events in our lives. Instead of theorizing about what we should do, if either there is a guiding intelligence in the universe or we just all become atoms, he prescribes one viewpoint that typically follows Stoic thinking and explains why both possible truths would lead to the same best actions and beliefs. That which is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee. Marcus reminded himself to not be upset by the misdeeds of others and to correct them if possible. But if they were stubborn and they wouldn't change, to accept it. In reacting to such people, we must never allow our own principles to be violated. Moreover, we should never be surprised by the wicked deeds of others. Avoid wishing that men are not as they are, because then we are wishing for the impossible. He likened his relation to bad people to them being different body parts of the same person. Good and bad people are both part of the same universal nature, and they are meant to interact and cooperate, the Stoics believed that we were part of an interconnected organism, that you couldn't hurt one person without hurting us all. When you think you've done well and another person has benefited by it, why, like a fool, do you look for a third thing on top? Credit for the good deed, or a favor in return? Marcus repeatedly explains why the pursuit of fame and praise is foolish, and why especially should not care about what others think about us, especially after we die. He points out that so many famous men have been forgotten, and that those who would praise us posthumously will also die. He explains that nothing is made better by praise. The beauty of things comes from the thing itself and not what people say about it. To think then that we are gaining something by being praised is a mistake. Do not live as if you had endless years ahead of you. Death overshadows you. While you're alive and able, be good. Marcus Aurelius' strongest philosophy comes when he speaks on the eternally changing nature of the universe and the acceptance of death. He reminds us that all of us will die. However, we only ever lose the present moment, because that is all we ever have. Nobody loses more by dying early. The longest and shortest life will end the same way and be finished for the same eternity. Let not future things disturb you, for you will come to them, if it shall be necessary, having with you the same reason which you now use for present things. Being superior to pain and pleasure allows us to fully accept the course of nature and focus on being virtuous. Our perceptions of events as troublesome are the real source of unhappiness, not the events themselves. Marcus believed that a person could immediately wipe away any upsetting impressions from their mind and be at peace. He also noted that if we don't let events make us worse people, we are never truly harmed by them. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will have strength. Our ability to reason is an important power we must use to the fullest. Stoics believe that reason could be used to understand the universal reason present in nature, which would lead to agreement with it, even if the events seemed harmful. Our rational minds have complete power over our opinions, and the mind only experiences suffering when it itself creates a desire for a specific outcome in life. Last one. Remember not to feel exasperated or defeated or despondent because your days aren't packed with wise and moral actions. But to get back up when you fail. Celebrate behaving like a human, however imperfectly, and fully embrace the pursuit you've embarked upon. Stoicism is one of the more well-known schools of ancient Greek philosophical thought, though perhaps one of the least understood. It is commonly understood today in the context of the stereotypical stiff upper lip in the face of adverse circumstances, which on the surface is an accurate representation of the Stoic mindset, but is lacking upon further exploration. Unfortunately, there is a modern resurgence of Stoicism that is cleverly disguising the philosophies of toxic masculinity in direct contradiction to the tenets of classic Stoicism. Bookstores are filled with recent publications about Stoicism, many of which have cover art that hints at the toxicity within the pages. Instead, Stoicism is a philosophy intent upon easing psychological suffering in much the same way that Buddhism proposes, and is similarly based upon the logical conclusion that all things in the universe are unified in their existence. This is also a fundamental tenet that binds Unitarian Universalists, with whom Stoicism has much in common. A good modern cultural example of a classic Stoic would be the Vulcan Mr. Spock from Star Trek. His logical and seemingly emotionless approach to life embodies the virtues of Stoicism very well. He presents a calm exterior in the face of everything that life throws at him, engaging in meditative and philosophical practices that enable him to endure any hardship and maintain an inner stillness that allows access to wisdom. Despite his emphasis on logic, one of the most famous Mr. Spock quotes is, "Logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end." Another good example is the late painter Bob Ross. His attitude of seeing mistakes as happy little accidents is a perfect example of the classic Stoic attitude, as well as of a joyful Stoic, which is perfectly possible. To be Stoic does not necessarily mean to be dull and dour. In classic Stoicism, the practice of virtue alone is enough to achieve eudaimonia, a well-lived life. Literally, good-spiritedness, eudaimonia. To truly understand this mindset, one must understand how the ancient Greeks viewed the spirit, or the daemon. It was something that was unique to the individual, much as the same way as the Roman genius, and it required cultivation to bring it to its full potential, and therefore the person to happiness and fulfillment. Individual fulfillment was not just important to the person, but to the polis, the city-state in which they lived and gave their loyalty. In the case of Stoicism, that was the great city-state of Athens, historical home of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, many others, established in the in the 3rd century BCE by Zeno of Citium. Stoicism derives its name from the Greek phrase stoa puikili, meaning painted porch, in reference to the colonnade where Zeno taught his students. In this way, Stoicism could be seen to translate as porch learning. It was a philosophical development out of the school of Cynicism. The 4 main Stoic virtues were wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice. Stoic philosophy was also strongly focused on understanding and living in accordance with the rules of the natural order, since everything is rooted in nature. To the Stoics, the highest form of virtue was utility, which is likely the source of the later interpretation of Stoicism, to mean enduring hardship or shunning convenience in the name of virtue. Virtue was everything to the Stoics, forming the foundation of philosophy itself. Philosophical virtue was comprised of the ideals of logic, monistic non-dualist physics, and naturalistic ethics. These 3 areas of focus were necessary for the eudaimonia as part of a logos, or philosophical discourse that not only took place with others, but also internally within oneself. This focus would become important 2,500 years later with the development of cognitive behavioral therapy, the philosophical foundation of which lies with the classic Stoics. Stoicism was reliant upon the Platonic concept of oneness of the universe, the existence of the monad, or the one, that encompasses all things and makes everything one with the creative principle of the universe. The unifying nature of the universe means that humans each possess a portion of the divine spirit of reason and the primordial fire that spurs creation and sustains it. This view of the universe directly connects classic Stoicism with modern Unitarian Universalism and bears a strong resemblance to the congregational profile of many UU churches, which also have an emphasis on intellectualism and a respect for nature. For example, UUs tend to believe that it is logical and natural to treat all human beings equally. And it is logical and natural to treat the earth and its creatures with respect. Unitarian Universalists don't generally have a creed like most churches, but we do have our guiding principles and purposes, of which there are 8. A cursory glance at the guiding principles of both Stoicism and Unitarian Universalism reveals strong parallels and connections between both schools of thought as practiced by the ancient Greeks and the modern revivalists. UUs tend to believe in the justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And the Stoics believed that it was virtuous to be free of anger, jealousy, and envy in all relationships. UUs further believe in acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. The Stoics believed philosophy itself was the practice of virtue. This includes the acceptance of fellow human beings and encouragement of practicing Stoic values for personal growth. A further UU belief is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and the Stoics believed in the wisdom of clear thinking to keep oneself free of passions and open to truth and virtuousness. The 5th UU principle refers to the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within congregations and society at large, which is definitely in keeping with Stoic philosophy. As we said, the eudaimonia of an individual and the strength and health of the polis were directly interrelated. Aristotle, a philosophical ancestor of Stoicism, believed the development of eudaimonia was only possible within the context of the human community of the city-state, to which people bore loyalty and obligation. This extends to the 6th UU principle of the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, for the Stoics believed that the world was one great city, and all humans are residents of that city. As world citizens, we bear a responsibility to the world city and all of its residents. This itself extends to the 7th UU principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Stoics believed in monism, or the oneness of the universe, so they also recognized themselves as an intrinsic part of the natural world and used its natural rules as a guide for how to live in harmony with each other and the earth. Some of the natural rules the Stoics obeyed include the avoidance of pathos, passions, which they included distress, pleasure, fear, lust. Like the Buddhists, they view the passions as being illusory, the result of incorrect judgments about situations, both good and bad. As Epictetus famously stated, it is not the events that upset us, but our judgment about the events. These philosophical tenets became the later basis of our first rational emotive behavioral therapy in the mid-1950s, followed by a descendant cognitive behavioral therapy in the 80s and 90s, which has become very popular in recent decades as a treatment for depression, anxiety, and other forms of mental illness. Both Stoicism and CBT focus on developing self-control to overcome destructive emotions via becoming a clear and unbiased thinker, to reveal the logos, or true nature, of any situation. This necessarily involves challenging and changing thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes that cause suffering and dissatisfaction in life. The goal is more satisfaction and fulfillment in life, rather than the dour outlook of the modern stereotypical Stoic, who's defined as a person who represses their feelings and endures patiently. This view of Stoicism didn't arise until the 16th century with the rise of Protestantism in Europe. The goal of Stoicism is not to repress feelings, but to recognize them as potentially illusory and therefore as unimportant. To a Stoic, the wise person, or sophos, would be free of passions and experience eupathia, or good feelings, mental clarity. Outside the sphere of therapeutic methods, there is also a modern resurgence and interest in Stoic philosophy as a way of life, although its modern interpretations can be very different than those proposed by the classic Stoics. We must make a distinction between classic Stoicism, which puts forth the image of someone who represses their emotions, and modern Stoicism, which is indeed a modern effort to revive classic Stoicism and its true principles. Again, Mr. Spock and his Vulcan race stand as good examples of classic Stoicism. Vulcans do experience emotions. They simply have learned over millennia, after a history of violence, to use meditation and philosophy to control their emotions so they are no longer destructive. Clearly, there is a difference between a system that seeks to suppress all emotion and a system that merely seeks to understand the true nature of emotion so as to not be overwhelmed or controlled by them. Modern Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy are both revivals of a venerable philosophical system, while toxic Stoicism can be used as an excuse to dominate and oppress, as is being seen in more hostile and patriarchal elements of American society. Stoicism is a philosophy of peace, equanimity, inclusiveness, not one of domination or oppression or exclusion. Unfortunately, adherents of toxic masculinity have hijacked the principles of Stoicism, such as arete, or excellence, as justification for abusive, narcissistic behaviors that are actually antithetical to true Stoic values. Similarly, forces within the motivational movement as well as business enterprises have taken Stoic principles and used them to justify what are actually anti-Stoic philosophies and attitudes. For example, the Stoic trait of fearlessness in the face of adversity is being abused to uphold personal attitudes of achieving success by any means necessary. This has its roots in the virtue ethics movement of the 70s, which upholds that one does the right thing because it is in one's best interest without considering others, without honoring the truth of inner being and interconnectedness upheld by classic Stoicism. This becomes the height of selfishness, which is not what Stoicism proposes. As a result, modern pop Stoicism has become at best a watered-down version of a fairly strict system of logic, physics, and ethics, and at worst, a justification for thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are in direct opposition to those encouraged by classic Stoics and its modern revival. This should not be a surprise in a world filled with people who want to return to the days when boys were told not to be sissies, children were told not to cry or they'd be given a reason to cry, and a woman's place was to be silent in the kitchen. This is the stereotypical representation of the controlling patriarchal Stoic mindset to which we have become culturally accustomed, and this is very different from classic Stoicism. As world citizens of the global city, we have a duty to that city and its residents, our cousins, to reclaim venerable philosophies that proffer truth from forces that seek to pervert and distort them. As Unitarian Universalists, we walk a path that closely parallels that of the Stoics, even if it is not precisely identical. And as such, we are its representatives as philosophical siblings. In these troubling times, it is more important than ever that we stay educated and aware of what's going on around us, so that we may notice when the truth is being misrepresented and perhaps save someone from being ensnared by falseness, even if it's only ourselves. And now we extinguish the chalice with the words, "We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again." Please take a few minutes to greet your neighbors, especially those you don't know yet, and then stick around to hear the good news.